welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. We are presented by Gatorade on this Monday. Dave Revson, Rafael Davis. What a weekend for Big Ten basketball.
A big weekend. Just when the entire country, they're down on the Big Ten. The Big Ten isn't as good as previous years. We come out and have a huge weekend, and even the two games that we lost, we gained some confidence from them and felt good about it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think pretty much every fan base can look at what happened this weekend and feel good about it, and it is rare to be able to say that. That is our big story. It was a weekend that included Purdue's third ever victory over a #1 team as the Boilers took down Arizona in Indy. Michigan State looking like the team everyone expected them to be in the preseason. They demolished #6 Baylor. Ohio State topped future Big Ten member UCLA. Nebraska went on the road and dominated K-State, who played in the Elite Eight a season ago. Indiana and Penn State, as Rafael alluded to, both suffering narrow defeats, and we'll get to the nature of those losses in a bit. But let's start with Purdue. They were fabulous. They led most of the way. They led by as many as 15. Zach Edey was big when they needed him to be big, but the guards really stole the headlines in this one, right?
And it was on both ends of the floor, because we're going to talk about their offense in a second, but defensively, they were big time, because you know Caleb Love, he can go and get you 30. He had 29 points. But you think about the Northwestern game, Boo Buie going off for 30. But it was Ryan Langborg, it was Ty Berry, it was Brooks Barnheiser that as a collective beat them from the backcourt. In this game against Arizona, you look at Pelle Larson, Kylan Boswell, they averaged 24 points a game, super efficient from the field. They only scored 16 points on 16 field goals. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer really took the charge on the defensive end. And then offensively, they were just special. 53 points on 9 of 16 from the three-point line, 5 assists, 7 steals, 5 rebounds. Fletcher Lawyer with 18 in the first half. Just a special performance by two sophomores that's got a lot better.
No doubt. And I thought what was really interesting was those guys clearly, again, they were the story for most of the game. Right. But, man, when they needed him, like when it got to the point where Purdue was sweating just a little bit there in the second half, Zach Edey, 8 straight points, exerts his dominance. And I think that kind of points out how difficult this Purdue team is to match up against if those guards are playing well. Because if they're playing well, it's a pick-your-poison team, and neither option is particularly appealing to the opponent.
Yeah, because they're even on the glass, they're even in the turnover margin, and then they make 10 threes. And when Purdue is making shots from deep, they're unguardable because you can't guard Zach Edey one-on-one down in the block. You see Omar Ballo, one of the better block defenders in the country, couldn't handle him in the second half. And then you had Lance Jones also have a good second half. 7 of his 9 points came in the second half. So when they're rolling from the perimeter, when they're not turning the ball over, when they're confident, not just putting the ball over their heads and throwing it in, it opens up the floor. That's why in that second half, you see Zach Edey being able to just take over the game. It was just a big-time performance on all fronts.
I just kept thinking that Arizona was, they made the run. They got it close, and you kind of thought, here we go, because they are such a talented team, but so impressed with the resilience of Purdue here. And look, again, the crowd helped them a lot in Indy. I mean, I think that was a big part of it. But you look at this Purdue team, you look at how many different options they have to beat you. It is a really impressive bunch. They now have 3 wins against AP top 10 teams. It's their most in 14 years. And again, we're not even to January 1st. So a lot to feel good about there with the Boilers. How about Michigan State against Baylor? And we talked last week about, hey, Michigan State needs to have some sort of a resume type win to hang their hat on. They haven't done anything here in the non-conference. But I did not think in my wildest dreams that it would look like this, that it would be a thorough domination from start to finish. I don't want to overstate it. I don't want to say this is worth 2 or 3 wins. It's not. It's one game. But it shows people who you are at your best.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things the tournament selection committee looks at come March. And, man, at their best, they showed us they could really be something.
And coming into this game, I thought it would be a good game for Michigan State because it was a guards game. You look at Baylor and how they win games. It's Walter, it's Dennis, it's Love, it's Nunn. They averaged 50-plus points on the season. In this game, Michigan State got back to that Michigan State-style defense, especially from the perimeter. Michigan State forced those guys to score 29 points on 11 of 28 from field goals and took them completely out of the game. Tyson Walker was great. He had 18 points at the half. Baylor had 17. So he was just outstanding. But it was not just him. It was as a collective getting back to their identity because Jay Nakins didn't have a great game offensively. Malik Hall struggled. But when you get 29 points off of 21 turnovers, that's the defending part of Michigan State. You're +9 on the glass, 8 offensive rebounds, 15 second chance points. That's their second brand of basketball is rebounding. And then they got on a transition. It's defend, rebound, and run. 21 points in transition. They just got back to Michigan State basketball, and this is what it should have looked like all season.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, you shoot 63% against a top 10 team. It's their best shooting percentage in 6 years. But, yeah, to me, what was fascinating about it was when, sometimes a team, you're motivated by your coach, right? I mean, he said afterward, I challenged them defensively. I challenged them on the glass. And it feels like sometimes that wears off. Like the first possession, you couldn't have scripted better, right? A shot clock violation for Baylor, then you get on, splash a three. They're like, okay, message received. But the fact that they just never let up in that first half, that you get up by 30 points, man, I mean, again, like I almost think that there was a point here in this last month and a half or so where I thought to myself, did we just grossly misevaluate Michigan State? Like, were we just totally missing the boat here? And this, to me, reaffirmed, like, kind of what they can be at their very best.
Because I think this game was about pride. I mean, these guys have been getting beat up on all season long by their coach, by the media, by their fans. And you think about Michigan State, their backcourt came into this season as we're the best backcourt in the country. A.J. Hogarth announced he was the best point guard in the Big Ten, one of the best point guards in the country. And now throughout this season, Baylor has turned into the best backcourt in the country with their 4 guards, 3 that are starting, and now you have a chance to go take food off of another team's plate. And I can remember playing against players that had more notoriety than us at Purdue, whether it be a Yogi Ferrell or Melo Trimble, and John Noctis and myself would always talk before those games, let's go make a statement. Let's go play against these guys, show them how good we really are, and that helps your mentality sometimes. But it's all about bottling this up. If they can't take this win and bring it in tonight against Oakland, it means nothing. So those older guys, they got to understand that and come out to play in this one.
Agree with you 100%. This is a challenging game tonight against Oakland, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But Greg Kampe always has a good team. He's given some Big Ten teams issues this year. So we'll see how they follow it up. But, man, I mean, the outlook right now from a Michigan State fan's perspective today versus Friday is night and day. It was that kind of a win that can maybe define your season. We wondered how Ohio State would bounce back after the loss to Penn State. Remember, they had the huge lead on the road in State College and just let it dwindle away. And I would say the answer against UCLA was pretty impressively. It's a nice win.
Yeah, big time. And they struggled in the first half. Bruce Thornton struggled in the first half, only 2 points, struggled from the field. Ohio State as a whole turned it over 10 times in that first half. But they really settled down in the second half, and their backcourt came to play in the second half. Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale, Jamison Battle combined for 32 points on 57% from shooting in the second half, and that's what got them over. You know, Zed Key and Felix Akpar, they're always going to produce, but Ohio State, they're going to go as their backcourt goes. And then when you do shoot 1 for 15 from 3,
with the one coming at the very end, right?
You really got to depend on your defense. And that's the difference between Ohio State this season and last year. They understand that they're not just going to outscore teams, run them out of the gym. You're going to have nights where the ball does not go in, and that's what happened against UCLA. But they held UCLA 38% from the field, 1 of 9 from the three-point line, and they turned them over, which was able to come away with that win.
And let's give credit to UCLA. I mean, that is a really good defensive team. But I like your point there because, to me, it showed you can grind out a win.
Exactly.
And we know from watching the Big Ten, as long as we have been, that in this league, at times, you're going to have to grind out a win. It's clear this Ohio State team is better on the offensive end than it is on the defensive end. But if you need to rely on the defense, and you're going to have to do that some in the Big Ten, This, to me, is the game that you can point at if you're Chris Holtman. You could be in a huddle and say, remember the way we beat UCLA. That goes a long way.
Because sometimes it feels better after a game that you grinded out, a game that you really fought through, that you struggled, and then you just won on a defensive end. The games I can remember winning at the barn on a block shot at the end of a game, those wins feel better when you do it the harder way and you're just not out there, everything's pretty, the ball is going through the net, the other team is struggling. But when you can grind one out, especially for a young team that didn't have much success last season in these tight games, it gives them more confidence that if we just stick to the basics, stick to the fundamentals of what we want to do, stick to what we do, we can win these close games, and that's what Ohio State showed.
And we're certainly better offensively in the second half. They scored 45 in the second after 22 in the first.
Only turned it over 3 times.
Yeah. So, again, the three-pointers weren't falling, but aside from that, the offense flowed much better in those final 20 minutes. I do want to talk about the 2 losses here because I do think both teams played really well. Let's start with Indiana. I would argue that Indiana may have played its best game of the year. They led for 35 minutes against the number 2 team in the country. It felt like they just wore down a little bit. I mean, they really shortened the rotation, and it felt like maybe in those last 5 minutes they just kind of ran out of gas. But I still think, kind of to your point at the top of the show, that even the losses felt good. This still felt good to me from Indiana's point of view.
Because you look at that first half, and if you can just bottle that up and have 2 complete halves of basketball, Indiana wins this game, and they're feeling even better about themselves because, Trey Galloway, big time, 28 points for the game. He was outstanding on both ends of the floor. But in that first half, I think we've seen the best basketball from Mackenzie Mbako that we've seen this season and a half. He had 11 points on the offensive end, very efficient. And then on the defensive end, he took the charge to Kevin McCullough and took him out of the game at points. He picked up that second foul in the first half, and that pretty much kind of killed his energy, never really got his flow back. He only scores 3 points in that second half, and Trey Galloway didn't have any help. And I think for Indiana, you look at that second half and those final 15 minutes of the game, that's winning time. Kansas understood what it was on the road. They go 13 of 20 from the field the last 15 minutes. Indiana goes 8 for 25 from the field the last 15 minutes. They don't have an easy basket, an easy guy to throw the ball into. Where we're struggling with the size of Dickinson, I think that's going to be their key finishing out this year. When things get stagnant, when things get tight, we need a guaranteed basket, a guy that can maybe break the guys down off the dribble, get to the paint, make a play, or someone we can throw the ball into and guarantee it.
And when you think about the fact they'll get Xavier Johnson back, I think this feels a little bit better from that point of view, too. I mean, I hear you. Again, like, man, you would have loved for those last 5 minutes to look like the first 35 because this is the kind of win that really propels you. But again, man, there's a lot of positive here. Khalil Ware, both ends of the court.
He's big time.
Yeah, no, he is a serious player.
He's a legit defender, for real.
It is really good. Hey, let's focus in on Penn State. I am not a big focus on one call kind of guy.
Right. That one call was terrible.
But I just have to say, like the call that came at the end of overtime with Penn State on top by 1, we're going to show it right now. They're up by 1. There are seconds left in the game. You get a loose ball here. You literally have no contact.
Unbelievable. In Madison Square Garden, you can't make this call. The ref wasn't even looking in the direction.
No contact.
Crazy.
And they call a foul, and that puts Georgia Tech on the free throw. Again, there is a foul called right there.
That is sick.
It's crazy.
Yes, it is.
It is really something. And it did, like, again, I get it. One call doesn't cost you the game. Well, I mean, if the call isn't made, they win the game. And they did a lot of things to win it. They did, especially, like, you want to talk about resilience. This was the second straight game. You're down double digits in the second half. This one down 10 in the final 6 minutes, battle back, forced overtime, and come out with a loss. But in much the same way, I think Indiana can point to positives. You can point to a ton of positives there for your Penn State.
Yeah, Penn State forced 17 turnovers, had 13 steals, turned those turnovers into 27 points. And I think this is one of the better games when you look at Kanye Clary and Ace Baldwin Jr. that they had as a collective. Scored 41 points, 10 assists, had complete control of the game, really worked well off of each other. And then Ace Baldwin was huge on the defensive end, especially down the stretch. A few steals that put them in position to win the game. And then the guy I look at Penn State State, and I think Coach Rose has found some magic in, is DeMarco Dunn, a guy transferred from North Carolina, only averaging about 13 minutes a game, 5 points a game. He had 17 points in this game. He was big time in their previous game. Then they had a guy, Puff Johnson, stepped up in second half and overtime, all 15 of his points. So you build some momentum with those two guys to go along with your guards, but they're going to need some interior play. Kudus Wahab, he gets some 10 rebounds, but no other front court player for Penn State had more than 4 rebounds. They were out-rebounded by 22.
Georgia Tech had more offensive rebounds than Penn State had defensive rebounds.
That's crazy.
It's never a good formula for winning. So those were all Saturday. A game yesterday that I think spoke volumes about the progress that a program has made, and that is Nebraska going into Kansas State. I understand this isn't the same Kansas State team that made the Elite Eight a year ago. I mean, they lost a ton of players off that group. But, I mean, Nebraska just handed it to them. Juwan Gary, unbelievable on the glass. I am a huge rink masked guy. I am totally on board with him and his skill set. I think we came into the year thinking Keisei Tominaga is going to be really good. And are they going to be able to have the pieces around him? And I think we're starting to see they do.
I mean, Keisei Tominaga goes on the road 3 for 11 from the field, and they still win that game handily. And you talk about Juwan Gary. I think Juwan Gary is the player in the Big Ten that no one's talking about right now. I think he would have been in the category for 6 men of the year in this league. Started the last 2 games, so Coach Hoiberg threw a wrench in that one. But 15-5 on the season off of the bench. In this game, 13 points, 18 rebounds, 11 of them on the offensive end. Just a big, tough, physical dude. 20 points against Michigan State. But you said it, Dave. It was done on the defensive end. This year's Nebraska team is so much more tougher. They get it defensively. You go into Kansas State, you hold Kansas State to 27% from the field, and then their best player, Cam Carter, averaging 17 on the year, you hold him 4 for 17 from the field, just 12 points, 2 turnovers. They get it on that side of the floor. So when it's ugly offensively for Nebraska, they still punk you in the glass. They were plus 17 there, and they defend you all the way to the end. And then they threw in 11 threes, which helps on the road.
Yeah, that does help. But it is so interesting to see how differently put together this team is. And look, to Fred Hoiberg's credit, like last year, you had Vanderbilt and Gary, and they were playing really good defense at the beginning of the year, and then both those guys got hurt. And so kind of what we were supposed to do, those were the toughness guys that they had kind of gone out and found. But it is fascinating to see how the composition of this roster, and I think maybe more of an understanding of it, what it takes to win in the Big Ten. You are going to have to be physical to win in this league. And we started to see it at the beginning of last year, and then, of course, they played great down the stretch without those 2 guys. And now I think we're really seeing it this year, just how different this Nebraska team is than maybe 3 years ago. Rest of the weekend scores. Illinois, no problem with a perennial NCAA tourney team in Colgate. Northwestern bounced back from the loss to Chicago State to top DePaul on the road. Michigan, Rutgers, Iowa, all easy winners. Let's start with the Illini, Raphael. And this is one maybe you worry about just a little bit. You know, you're coming off of exams. Colgate is perennially, as I said, a team that you see on your bracket in March, but they got off to a great start. They were up 14-0 and never looked back in this one. What stood out?
Terrence Shannon in the first half. You think offensively, he's been great all season long. But you look at Colgate, you look at Braden Smith, their point guard. He's the head of the snake for those guys. Their leading scorer averaging 14 points a game. And Terrence Shannon completely took him out of the game. And this is a 6-foot point guard. So it gives you the confidence that Terrence Shannon can not just guard the 3s, the 4s in this league, but he can shut down the 1s and the 2s when you think about a Braden Smith for Purdue, a Tyson Walker for Michigan State. And I think that's what Coach Underwood was preparing him for. But a guy I look at Illinois who's really taken off the last 2 games is Quincy Guerrier. 15-7 last night, 18 a couple games ago. He's a guy they kind of can depend on to be that 2nd or 3rd scorer.
Fired up to see Coleman Hawkins play well,
big time,
too. You know, obviously had the injury issues to start the year, but he really looked good and can be a difference maker. And then they pounded it inside a little bit more. They're plus 18 at the free throw line, 30 points in the paint. It's the kind of way you're going to have to win, not being so reliant on the 3.
Sure.
At Northwestern, a win's a win after the Chicago State game. I thought they defended great against DePaul. I mean, they were really good on that end, and they have not looked as connected on that end this year. Offensively was a real struggle, though, in this one.
And you tip your hat to Nick Martinelli, because Coach Painter would tell us before games, This guy's going to win us a game one game. This guy off the bench may win us a game on the road. And without Nick Martinelli, Northwestern doesn't have a chance against DePaul. He comes in off the bench, gives them 16 and 5 in 24 minutes. He was big time. And then defensively in that second half, Northwestern just took control of the game. You think about it. DePaul had 8 turnovers in the second half and only 5 field goals made. And when the basketball's not going in for you, you have to defend at a high level. And for Northwestern, having older guys on the perimeter that understand that, they were able to get the job done. And then Barnheiser and Langborn, they got going in the second half, 18 of their 31 points.
Yeah, still nothing out of Ty Berry, 2 straight games. It felt like he had really turned the corner. I mean, he was amazing in the Purdue game. I mean,
on both ends, yeah.
Was fabulous. He's 1 of 13 the last 2 games, so maybe he's just in a little slump. But they've got to get more out of the big guys. I mean, their 3 centers combined for 4 points.
And you got to you look at those 3 centers, and maybe you don't need 10 and 8 out of each of them, but if you can get 6 and 3 out of 2 of them, that's 12 and 6. And when you look at Ohio State, you look at Felix Akpar and Azed Key, 13 and 7 in combined per numbers for those 2 guys against UCLA. That's all the post-production you need. You just need a little bit.
Yeah, it wasn't a great week for Northwestern. They got Arizona State on Wednesday in Phoenix. Juwan Howard is back for Michigan. No issues against Eastern Michigan. They followed up the Iowa win with another really good performance here.
6 guys made a 3, which shows they're sharing the basketball. 18 assists on the game, 7 guys with the assists, which shows their cohesiveness of this group, although they're playing with a bunch of new guys. These guys like to play with each other, and you can tell. And it was good to see Doug get some help. Doug has been struggling the last few games. I think he's just a little bit tired, leading the Big Ten in minutes, and he needs those other guys to play well. And this is a guy that I've seen play well the last couple games is a Terrace Reed. Went on the road, played really well at Iowa. I love this post-game interview. Followed it up with 13 and 8 against in this game. He's a guy on the block they could throw the ball into, get a bucket. Came off the bench in this game, got his spot took. Didn't even matter. Took the same approach. He was big time.
His career high going into the Iowa game was 11. He's exceeded that each of the last 2 games. And to your point on helping out Doug McDaniel, Jalen Llewellyn in 16 minutes.
Yep.
He sat out that Iowa game. He got tweaked that leg in practice, but it seems like he's on the mend here. And if he can get some minutes to spell McDaniel there at the point guard, I think it makes McDaniel much better.
Yep.
Rutgers, huge game from Cliff Amore, 25 points as a career high for him. They were in control throughout against Long Island.
And it was good to see Cliff get going because you look at that Wake Forest game, only 4 points, 4 rebounds on 4 shot attempts on the road. That's not good enough for you, Cliff. You look at the Illinois game at home, 7 points, 3 of 10 from the field, 5 turnovers. That's not good enough. That's not going to win Rutgers games. Cliff has to be a 18 and 12 guy on nightly for Rutgers to be able to compete, to be in the top of this league. So it was good to see them feed the big fella, get him going early, get some confidence going. And then it's good to see Mag back on the floor. 10 points in this game. He's their stabilizer on both ends of the floor. I think Rutgers gets better throughout this season, especially with Mag getting better and getting healthier.
And then your long-lost cousin, JaMychal Davis, playing very well. The freshman, second straight, really nice game for him. So you start to see, again, this kind of feels to me like last year kind of brought some freshmen along slowly, and then you would see moments from them. So impressive there. They'll get a good test against Mississippi State in Newark coming up this weekend. They're good. Iowa back on track after the Michigan loss. They pounded Florida A&M. They played 15 players, kind of just what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, plus 14 on the glass, plus 24 in the paint, and that's big time because Iowa's been getting punked the last few games, and they've been giving up 90 points a game the last few games. So it's good to see them get back to defending at a high level. But a player I look at for Iowa, and I know their core is strong with Ben Krikke, Sanford, Perkins, and McCaffrey, but for Owen Freeman, as he gets better throughout this season, it's just going to make Iowa better. Because I don't believe Ben Krikke can play a true 5 in the Big Ten. You look back at how Coach Fran McCaffrey uses his 4 men that can score the ball, Keegan Murray, when I played Aaron White, Jared Utoff, they always had a bruiser with them, with a Philip Rebracha, or even when I played Adam Woodbury, a big guy that can rebound, defend. I think Owen Freeman can be that guy and score a little bit better at this stage in his career.
Yeah, how about a double-double for him in less than 20 minutes? You mentioned Keegan Murray. It's just a good time to mention he had 11 consecutive threes.
It's crazy,
right? Game
big time.
On Saturday night, 12 of 15 overall, 47 points.
That's unbelievable, man.
He was remarkable. As promised, Elena is here. Let's just say Texas was fabulous. First of all, it just felt like Nebraska never got in sync, as was kind of summarized there.
Texas came out from the start. They were just on top of it. Nebraska looked a little frazzled from the get-go. I thought maybe they're young. It's their first national championship for a lot of these players, and Texas was here last year. But then as the match went on, it was just all Texas. They talked about it multiple times, Coach Cook and Merritt Beeson, saying it's the serve and pass game. And that's truly what volleyball comes down to in the end. If you can attack from the service line, and then if you can pass so you can get your offense and system, that's what's going to win matches. And Texas was just dominant the entire time. They were playing like they were the best team in the country and just simply outplayed a really, really good Nebraska team.
It's pretty amazing to think that Texas was 1 point away from being eliminated in the regional semifinal. And yet, you know, here they are. It seemed like from that moment on, right, they just became a dominant force. They knocked off 3 straight #1 seeds. They were really, I mean, Madison Skinner is just an unbelievable athlete to watch.
She's so fun to watch, and she is so good for the sport of volleyball just because the way you watch her play, she's such an explosive athlete and a great leader, but she's just a winner. I mean, this is her 3rd national championship, 2nd in a row with Texas. She had 1 with Kentucky. She's one of those players that you watch play, and in the national championship, she has her best match. Like, that's incredible. But for Nebraska, they were just never quite able to get into their groove. I mean, an incredible season. It's an unfortunate way to end it, but I have no doubt they'll be back.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about putting this season into perspective. And I thought John Cook summarized it really well there, where he said, hey, at the beginning of the year, people weren't talking about us. They were talking about Wisconsin, who also had a tremendous year, and we'll get to them in a moment. But to have a team with 4 freshmen, I should say, playing really prominent roles with no seniors, it certainly bodes well for the future, but the accomplishment of just getting to this point with a team composed in that way, I mean, talk about being ahead of schedule. They're way ahead of schedule.
I think back in August, too, I mean, I'll be the first to say I was not expecting Nebraska. I probably didn't even pick them in my top 3 in the conference just because there were so many question marks around roles that needed to be filled in, right? They had a freshman setter, freshman outside, freshman middle, like so many young players on the court. You didn't know what to expect. And then they go this season and they win the Big Ten. They go undefeated at home, set a world record in attendance, like 33 win season. They make a national championship. This match on Sunday does not take away from this record-breaking, incredible season for the Huskers, and their future is bright. Yes. You know, graduating, no seniors, all of these players have the potential to be back, and I think that's scary, and I think that puts them, now they have this chip on their shoulder as well of knowing what it's like to play in the national championship and end up on the wrong side of it. That's going to carry them through and fuel some fire for them.
We've cited this a couple times in the last week, and they put it up on the broadcast yesterday as well, but no one's won with no seniors since 1986.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason for that. Right? It's hard to do if you don't have experience, and I think we saw a little bit of that maybe in yesterday's match, where it just felt like the young players got a little overwhelmed when it started to steamroll. They couldn't quite figure out a way to get out of it. I do want to talk about Wisconsin as well. A remarkable season for them. Yet another Final Four for a program that has made a lot of them here in recent years. What do you make of the Badgers? Again, falling a little bit short of their goals, bowing to the eventual national champs.
Yeah, once again, an incredible season for them. And it doesn't just, you don't want to put a bow on it with that Final Four loss to Texas, because Texas, you know, they won the national championship. They dominated Wisconsin the same way they dominated Nebraska, and that's from the service line, and they just completely took over that match. But that doesn't really speak to what Wisconsin did this season. I mean, they also went undefeated at home. They took down Nebraska.
Right.
They were a part of many attendance records as well. Big Ten Player of the Year, Sarah Franklin, has another year, will be returning. They have multiple players that could be back. So next season, this team could also look really similar. They are a team with a lot of experience, but they have a lot of players that have another year to potentially come back and play for the Badgers.
Right. They had 4 players get some sort of All-American mention, and all 4 of them can come back, and that includes the National Player of the Year. So that's a nice foundation to build on. So we've talked about Nebraska and how loaded they could be a year from now. We've talked about Wisconsin, how loaded they could be. Big picture, give people a sense of, and I know the portal's hard and it's just impossible to predict in some ways, but where we sit right now, give us a sense of, aside from those 2, what you're expecting in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think big picture overall for this conference, we're just as strong as we historically have been. Going into this conference, going into the season, there are a couple questions about the conference only making 5 teams into the tournament, but 4 of those 5 teams went to the Sweet 16, 2 in the Final Four. I think that just proves the strength of this conference. And then teams like Wisconsin and Nebraska that made that Final Four, returning a lot of those players. But then 2 of those other teams that made the Sweet 16 in Penn State and Purdue, Purdue has 2 of the youngest All-American duos in this entire country, with Eva Hudson, Chloe Chacoin coming back. They have a huge core that will be back, and I have no doubt they are going to be competing for the top of the Big Ten and going far in the tournament. Penn State's returning Jess Merzick, Cameron Hanna, Taylor Trammell, a duo of 3 players that are just some of the best in the entire conference. So I have high hopes for that team as well. And then you have the teams like Indiana and Illinois who are really hitting their stride at the end of the season. Illinois gets Raina Terry back, who's a unanimous first-team All-Big Ten player. So there's a lot of people coming back and some great freshmen coming in. With the transfer portal, you never know who's going anywhere, but we're really not losing too many players in the conference going into next season, which I think is amazing because this conference is so strong. We might be a little bit top-heavy right now, but that top-heavy is 2 of the 4 best teams in the entire nation.
Right, and they will, I mean, it'd be shocking if they're not named among the top 4 in the preseason next year, too.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So it's, look, the Big Ten has more than held its own. They won 9 of the last 17 national championships. Little disappointing when you have half the Final Four field and you don't come away with it. But again, I think the biggest takeaway from the weekend was, man, Texas played really well.
Absolutely.
When they needed to play really well. Elena, this has been great stuff all year. Thanks so much for illuminating, educating. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
It is time to go around the Big Ten, starting with Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes. Iowa dominated Cleveland State Saturday. Clark led the way, hitting 9 3-pointers, matching her career high as part of a 38-point performance. The Hawks will host Loyola of Chicago Thursday to close out their non-conference slate. That one can be seen on Big Ten Plus. Latest women's poll is out. No changes in the top 12, so Iowa remains at number 4. Ohio State and Indiana both down a spot to 13 and 16, respectively. Future Big Ten members, Washington, USC, UCLA, all in the top 25, including the Bruins at number 2, which sets up a huge one tonight in Columbus. Buckeyes and Bruins game you can see over on FS1. A whiteout is planned for Value City Arena. Buckeyes seeking their 3rd ranked win of the season, taking on a Bruins squad that has steamrolled its competition thus far, most recently dominating 20th ranked Florida State, 95-70 out. 8 last time out. And look who is back atop the AP poll. It is the Purdue Boilermakers, and we've got them in our big stat, which is brought to you by Gatorade. Purdue now the new number 1 team after knocking off Arizona Saturday, their 3rd ever win against number 1 and first in 23 years, with the last such win coincidentally also coming against the Wildcats. It was the 5th Quad 1 win of the year for Purdue. That is the most in the nation. And there you have it, Purdue up to number 1 in the AP poll once again. After, remember, they got knocked off that perch by Northwestern earlier this year. They are back, Ray Fell, and I think it begs the question, how does this Purdue team, after what we've seen from them to this point this year, compare with Purdue's team last year?
You think about college basketball, you think about players and their growth throughout their careers. Players normally make their biggest jump in their college career from freshman to sophomore year, especially when you played a bunch as a freshman. You see it happening with Bruce Storen at Ohio State. So Fletcher Loyer, Braden Smith, in their 2nd year, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're more equipped for college basketball at this level, and then they're just more confident about their game on the offensive end of the floor. You see it against Arizona, 53 points between the 2 of them. They weren't even looking for Zach Edey at times. They're just getting their game on. Braden Smith is taking his game to another level on the offensive end. They're D'ing up better this season. This is their best defensive team they've had in the last 3 years, and that's kind of been their knockoff when it comes late into the season. And then the addition of Lance Jones. Lance Jones has to be one of the more underrated transfers this offseason. He gives them a third guy on the perimeter that you have to guard. Last season, it was guarding Braden Smith off the bounce, Fletcher Lawyer, and then there wasn't a third guy. Ethan Morton wouldn't shoot the ball at times. So now you have a guy in his career who's made over 200 threes, scored over 1,500 points, can break a guy down off the bounce, get to the basket. You have to check him. You see in the double screens that Purdue likes to do with Lance Jones and Zach Edey. Lance Jones is popping. Zach Edey is rolling. Braden Smith is getting to that right hand. You have to make a choice between the three of them. And last year, they didn't put teams in that type of bind.
The three-point shot is so big in college basketball, and if you were to look at Purdue last year and try to find an Achilles heel, I mean, that was the Achilles heel. They were 276 in the nation in three-point percentage. They are 9th this year. So you think about what a huge jump they've made on that end of the court. To me, that's the biggest difference. Now, can you sustain it in the Big Ten? We'll see. I mean, the Northwestern game, like Northwestern went with last year's game plan, right, which was to throw everything at Zach Edey, who still had a huge game, and dare to Purdue to beat him from three, and Purdue could not do it. They did not shoot the three well in that game, so that does still concern you a little bit. But to me, that feels like the aberration with this year's team, whereas last year felt like a little bit more of the norm. Do you agree? I mean, I feel like this is a much better perimeter team than a season ago.
No, I agree, especially when you think of shooting the ball. Fletcher Lawyer, his legs died at the end of last season, and now this year he's not expected to defend the best perimeter guy. You have Lance Jones for that defensively, so it saves his legs there. Now you have multiple shot makers. You have Lance Jones. Off the bench, Cam Heide, Miles Colvin can shoot the ball from deep. That helps. And then, like you said, against Northwestern, Purdue reverted a little bit back to old ways of playing. Catch the ball, put it above your head, and look inside. You look at that game against Arizona, they are getting downhill, attacking off the bounce, getting to their pull-ups, just more confident off the dribble and putting more paint pressure on a defense outside of Zach Edey, and that's helped them as well.
Well, they got a couple of easier games, at least on paper, here before New Year's, and then January 2nd, on the road at Maryland. You want to show you're different than last year. Remember, that was the one double-digit loss.
They got ran out
last year for Purdue on the road against Maryland. We know how tough the Terps are at home. We'll see how the Boilers fare in that one. The dramatic conclusion of our show next. Raphael and I will look ahead to some big games on the schedule this week. We will give you the lowdown on Big Ten Today. Wrap things up here on Big Ten Today. We look at some of the key games on the slate this week in the Big Ten. It starts tonight here on the Big Ten Network. We were talking about earlier, Michigan State hosting a solid Oakland team. You've got Michigan in Charlotte to take on Florida in the Jumpman tomorrow. Got bragging rights coming up on Friday. See, Illinois is now 13th in the AP poll. Wisconsin 24th. They will take on Chicago State on Friday. We know what they can do to you. So those are the other ranked Big Ten teams in addition to Purdue. I like that Mississippi State-Rutgers game as well. It's going to be a really good one. Let's dive into a few of these. And we were talking about Michigan State-Oakland a little bit earlier. You know, Oakland has always been a solid program under Greg Kampe. He plays a very difficult schedule every year. They open with Ohio State and Illinois. They gave them some challenges. This is one of those games that if you're going to show you're going to build on this Baylor game, you got to come out and play well.
And they need good production from guys like Jay Nakins, Malik Hall, Carson Cooper, Matty Sissoko. Those guys have to be productive, but they have to be efficient from the field. Oakland's going to play that zone. They're going to mix up the defenses. So Michigan State just has to be dialed in across the board. Pay attention to scouting report stuff defensively, but it's just getting back to their identity. Defend, rebound, and run. What they did against Baylor, it worked out, and now it's about continuing that through.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an Oakland team. They won it at Xavier earlier. So, again, this will not be an easy game, at least on paper, although Baylor was an easy game. It certainly didn't look like it was going to be. Michigan's looked solid the last two outings. Yeah. Intriguing one against a Florida team that, like them, played in the NIT a season ago. So these are two teams kind of trying to retool. And I think for both of them, this is a good barometer to see where they stand.
I love the balance Michigan had against Eastern Michigan. 5 guys in double figures, 6 guys made it 3, 7 guys with 1 assist or more. And you need to continue that on. It can't just be, Doug, go get us 30 and hope we win this game. I love what Olivia Conway's been doing this season. He has 17-9 against Eastern Michigan, 5 assists himself. He's going to have to be productive on the inside. And then the growth of Terrace Reed the last 2 games, averaging 16 the last 2. He's going to be key in this one because Florida is a team, they'll beat you up on the offensive glass. One of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. They turn those offensive rebounds into points. So the rebounding war in this game is going to be critical, taking care of the basketball and rebounding.
Really interesting style of play for Florida. They love to run. They're going to get up and down the court. We've wondered a little bit about depth here with Michigan. Again, having Llewellyn back, I think, helps them a great deal. And then, as you say, rebounding has not been a strong suit so far this year for Michigan. So can you hang with Florida on the glass, particularly clearing that glass on your defensive end and keeping them from getting second looks? Bragging rights is always fun. Missouri was an amazing turnaround story last year under Dennis Gates. They are not off to quite as good a start this year, but this is a series where Missouri's kind of had its way here of late. This is one the Illini look at, and you really have to win.
And this is one of those games where records go out the window. Because you look back to a season ago, Illinois got ran out of the gym in their rivalry game, and they lost by 20, but at times it felt like it was plus 30, plus 40 points. So you know Coach Underwood and assistant coaches are drilling that home in their locker room. But for Illinois in this game, I want to see if they can get more paint production. You talked about it earlier. It can't be just 3 or nothing. At Tennessee, 55% of their field goals were from three-point range. They've got to drive that basketball more with those big bodies, get more paint touches, get more paint production. And then Quincy Guerrier, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Last 2 games, he's been averaging over 18 points on 55% from the field. He's turning into that second guy. Marcus Domask is a third scorer with Coleman Hawkins making shots from deep. This team is dangerous.
I think what's really interesting is Missouri is incredibly perimeter-oriented. I mean, this is a team that shoots a ton of threes. And you sometimes wonder, it feels like teams, I don't want to say fall into the trap, but when the other team's shooting a lot of threes, it kind of, well, this is how we're going to play. Missouri's going to shoot a ton of threes. And so I think the challenge becomes, can Illinois play its game and not fall into playing Missouri's game? So we'll see. Finally, Maryland and UCLA Friday. It feels like this is one where defense is going to rule the day.
100%. This is another game where you go back to last season, Maryland's feeling really good about themselves. The crowd is full. UCLA comes through those doors and boat races Maryland. So you know Coach Willard, they're talking about that inside those locker rooms, and they're talking about going out and playing on the road and being successful. Because you look at Julian Reese's stats at home versus away from the Xfinity Center, is drastically different. At home, Juju is averaging 19 points, 12 rebounds, a couple blocks, 63% from the field. When he is on the road, 11 points a game, 7 rebounds on 43% from the field, only getting to the free throw line 6 times compared to 11 at home. They got to find a way to get him going because he's going to be key when you think about the big fella down at UCLA. If those guys don't average out, if he can't win that matchup, if Dante Scott doesn't get going, he's really struggled the last 4 games, just 4 points a game, 22% from the field. They need those 2 big guys to be physical because Mick Cronin and those guys, they're going to try to punk you, push you around.
Well, we saw that against Ohio State, and they did a really good job in the first half against the Buckeyes, and then Ohio State adjusted in the second half. This will also be interesting just for no other reason than you have them going to UCLA. It's going to be a conference game a year from now. Just the notion of traveling across the country and getting ready to play a game, all that stuff. It's going to be great. I mean, you can't beat Paul Pavilion, really. An incredible history in that building. We will give you some more on all of those games as we continue through the week. I will be joined by Trent Meacham tomorrow. We will see you then.